Women on the Front Line, International Women's Day 2021. The Honourable Bridgid Annisette-George, Speaker of the House of Representatives. How has the pandemic impacted you, a woman on the front line and in a significant leadership position?
I think the sudden emergence of the pandemic and its swift spread globally was a real surreal experience, Watching those images all through the world, to me, reminded me of watching a science fiction movie. But I think for a member of the legislature, Frontline takes on a different connotation. It's not like Frontline as a healthcare worker and so on. But Parliament was required to be responsive. It had to be responsive to support the medical advice and the scientific advice to be able to keep our citizens safe. And in being responsive, it meant that Parliament had to remain open. I call all parliamentarians and the staff my constituents. In that standing order, I think it is 123 or 124 of the House of Representatives, gives the Speaker the responsibility for the precincts of the Parliament, so that Frontline, as I said, was different in that we had to be responsive. Parliament had to create regulations and laws to ensure the safety of our citizens, and therefore that was our front line. As Speaker, it meant that my remit required that I kept parliamentarians and our very dedicated staff safe. And therefore, very quickly, we had to adopt policies, create policies to ensure that the building was safe, to ensure that we created COVID protocols for not just mere things like the entry and the leaving of the precincts, but also, for instance, like we had to prevent people coming in. We had to set up protocols for delivery of mail. We had to also ensure that there was social distancing in the chamber, create and get buy-in from parliamentarians with respect to how do we limit numbers in this space. So it affected us in that kind of way. And we had to do it to ensure that we contained and kept safe our environment so that there would be no breach in the functioning of Parliament. I think that I could say that even though the responsibility is mine by the standing orders, I was ably assisted by Madam Clerk. Without her as the administrative head at that helm, I don't think that as Speaker I could have done it alone. It had to be a marriage of the head of the legislature as embodied as the Speaker and the administrative head. I think that our record speaks for itself, and this is not being boastful. We've been able to maintain our sit-ins, but for a 2-week hiatus in the beginning of the pandemic, we have maintained our sit-ins. We've been able to go through the rigorous budget, which really calls for the better part of a month, back-to-back sittings in the two chambers. And we've done all our business that we have been scheduled to do in the interests of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So I think all in all, having regard to the adaptations that we've made, I think Parliament has done extremely well.
Do you see there being more equality for women in the future because of the pandemic?
I think that the question of equality for women is not a logical consequence of the pandemic. I think the pandemic has shown if women needed to be able to support their competence, their abilities, their skills, their intuition, I think the pandemic is a perfect case in point. I don't think women needed it, but if somebody wanted support, the pandemic shows it. The pandemic showed that women operated alongside their male counterparts in the areas of science, in the areas of healthcare, in the areas of medicine, in the areas of mobilization. And of course, while women might be still very few in number as state leaders, history has recorded the success of female state leaders. We all know about the successes of Chancellor Merkel in Germany, of Prime Minister Ardern in New Zealand, and closer to home, of Prime Minister Motley in Barbados. And I mean, they're not unique. If you look at Ethiopia, you look at Finland, I mean, it is there. So I think that women need not have to establish that, look, we bring experience, we bring competence, we bring skills, we bring compassion, we bring a whole heap of skills. Not that our male counterparts don't, but that we also have valid experiences that we could bring to the table. The data has suggested, though, that the pandemic has widened gaps, systemic gaps that existed with respect to inequality. It has not only widened gaps, but it has created new challenges for women. And therefore, I think it is important that the pandemic brings to us the reality of how much harder we have to work to bring about equality. The data suggests at this rate, equality will happen 130 years from now, not in a lifetime of any one of us existing here. So I think we owe it to future generations to ensure that whatever slippages in terms of the progress for equality that would have occurred as a result of the pandemic, we accelerate. So we make up for lost time and we advance. Okay, so I always like this phrase that Denzel Washington used at the commencement speech, I think at Howard University a few years ago. He says, fall you will fall, but ensure you don't fall down, that you fall forward. And I borrow that for this. We may have slipped, so we may have fallen. Let's project forward, fall forward. And it must be a concerted, deliberate effort, not just only for the people at the top. This has to be a top-down, a bottom-up effect, that we all commit to this goal of equality in every sphere of life.
Do you think International Women's Day should continue to be celebrated?
Celebrating International Women's Day is not a statement about men. It is a statement about women. It's not taking away anything from men. It's not saying anything negative about men. It is giving us a day for us to commit to something that I think is in the interest of all humanity. Okay? That we have men, we have women, it's almost 50-50, proportions in the world, and therefore making decisions or creating plans or policies with only hearing one voice and not hearing another voice may not be in the best interests of the whole. So I think it's important to celebrate International Women's Day, celebrate whatever successes, and recommitting to the future. It's like your birthday, okay? We all celebrate our birthdays in different ways. We mark it. Some of us in a very, very demonstrative way. Some of us in a more subtle way. But we mark one's birthday recognizing one's contributions and also where do we go from here? So I think it's something to celebrate. we need a day to keep focus on where we're going.
Women on the Front Line, International Women's Day 2021.